Hi everyone, my name is Joseph, and today I want to discuss Dunkirk by Christopher Nolan, which came out on July 21st, 2017. Some of the cast from this movie is Fionn Whitehead, who's portraying Tommy, Cillian Murphy portraying the shivering soldier, Jack Lowden, who portrays Collins, Tom Hardy, who portrays one of the pilots, Kenneth, excuse me for the last name, um, Kenneth Brogna, who plays Commander Boat. I can't see his last name is being blocked out. His name's not Boat though. There's more to it. Excuse me. Mr. Rylance. Sorry, everyone. Mark Rylance, not Mr. Rylance. It's Mr. Dawson. Barry Kingham as George Mills. And I'm just gonna name two more. Tom Glenn Carney playing Peter, and then lastly Ariane Barnard who played Gibson. Yeah, so this movie, one probably noticed some of these characters didn't have a proper name, a character's name. So if one has heard about Dunkirk, they probably have heard that it's a movie about wonderful cinematography, but also a movie that's lacking characterization, or specifically lacking characters. And what I find so cool and great about this movie is the fact that, so one looks at my channel, you'll see that I do other videos from different properties. And just last week, I had a conversation with, I think, two of my videos discussing characterization versus narration, and which one do I prefer more. And in that video, I ended up answering that a good property, in my opinion, would typically have a mixture of both. But when it comes to only having one or the other, I think it's always important to have some characterization, some story, rather than nothing at all of the other. And what I mean by that, so the perfect example that I could think of when I think about Dunkirk is The Lighthouse. So The Lighthouse is another movie that was very much praised for its movie making skills and for the way that it was constructed. But in terms of its narration, in terms of its story, in my opinion, there really wasn't much there. Although the characters were interesting, the characters very much did feel like fictional pieces of work where they didn't feel real per se. And this lighthouse, these interactions at this lighthouse felt like it was in service to this movie. And I know that sounds a little bit ironic for me to say, because isn't all properties, be it a movie, show, animated show, manga, anime, and so forth, video game. Excuse me, everyone. So I'm gonna have to be doing this sometimes. Unfortunately, there's a ray of light. I'm blocking the top of my camera, so I thank you for your patience. But I'll be doing that here and there. Anywho, and I lost my train of thought a little bit. Excuse me, and I do thank you for your patience. But what I was discussing, so yeah, so it didn't feel real. I know that sounds a little bit comical for me to say, but the whole, in my opinion, a good story is one that allows the viewer to become engrossed with it. That they, not that it's escapism, but they're able to view the characters and the setting that they're in as something that they themselves, the readers, the watchers, that they could utilize in their own lives in the future. In fact, Sir Philip Sidney, that's what he said that literature was for. I know we're not talking about the written word, but I would argue that television and TV shows, it could also be a form of literature because of the scripts. So again, I know that sounds comical for me to say that for The Lighthouse, the characters didn't feel immersive, they felt inorganic. For me, Dunkirk does the opposite of that. Dunkirk is a movie where, again, it's being praised for its movie making skills, but with Dunkirk, although it is true there's really no characters per se, when one watches Dunkirk, there's still a narration being told. And what is the story that's being told? It's the story of Dunkirk, the story of the Battle of France that was unfortunately lost, and the Allies needed to retreat from the beaches of Dunkirk, from the shores of Dunkirk. So that's what the story is discussing. And although it's true again that these soldiers, they may not be acting as individuals, one could still emotionally get attached to them, because if one has ever seen Band of Brothers, that movie, that series does characterization and storytelling, narration very well, and that makes sense because it's a TV series, right? But there's a few episodes where the one that I could think of off the top of my head is the one where they're in the snow. And one of the male characters, he ends up going, he meets a nurse essentially, but he has to go back to the snow as well. Barrington or something like that, I believe is the episode is called. But during the episode, I would argue that it was very much more about the setting, and the Band of Brothers, the 501st, having to deal with this setting where they were constantly being bombarded, and all they could do was just take cover in the foxholes. But at the same time, they could also, they needed to continue on with their daily lives, even though they were surrounded and they were constantly threatened with their lives. That was just the world that they were living, unfortunately, because of war. That whole episode, again, it shows how the soldiers take cover in foxholes, how some soldiers end up getting hurt, and some people are lucky that they don't get hurt. Just really demonstrating the randomness of war. And that episode, I would argue, is what Dunkirk is doing as well. And again, I know there's no characterization. That doesn't mean a story is not being told. That doesn't mean that Nolan doesn't have a specific endpoint in mind. The story is what is occurring during the retreat of Dunkirk. So it begins during the retreat of Dunkirk, the initiation of the retreat, and then it ends at the conclusion of that retreat. So again, hopefully, and that makes sense what I'm discussing. Again, I do ask for your patience. I do thank you for your patience. I do realize now there's like a green hint at the top. But again, I've never really been very good with lighting. But I'm going to tangent, so forgive me, pardon me. Anywho, so I don't agree with that assessment where people are stating that it's a good movie that's lacking substance. It had a story. It had great cinematography in order to display this story. And I think what makes this movie work so well is the fact that this movie, for me, really did feel more like an anthology set within one movie. And please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never experienced something like this within a movie. And I might be praising Christopher Nolan a bit too much, but let me explain what I mean. So this movie has 3 different stories, all set during Dunkirk, but all within varying different time lanes. We have the story at the Mo that takes place over a week, the story in the air that takes place in 1 hour, and the stories of the sea, which takes place, I believe, it was 1 day. Correct me if I'm wrong. The time frames are listed at the beginning of the film. But despite what makes this so cool, in a typical anthology, each story would have been its own episode. 1 episode for the sea, 1 episode for the air, 1 episode for the Mo, right? But in this instance, what Christopher Nolan does instead, he's not working with the series, he's working with the movie. And what he does instead is he does his best to have the story starts around the same time. But since they all have different varying lengths, he has to edit the story so with the middle parts, they're able to convey what's being conveyed, the story of Dunkirk. And at first, it is a little bit jarring because we go from daytime to nighttime. I was like, whoa, what's going on? Once one catches on, it's a very smooth flow, a smooth transition. One just goes, oh, that's why we're doing this. And I have to say, I really liked it. I think that was great storytelling, very great showing versus telling. For example, from The Wire, I've mentioned this before, but in The Wire Season 1, they show the process of setting up a wiretap, but by the time the audience gets to the last season, there is no scene at all showing the process of setting up that wiretap. It's just stated on camera, and off camera, they're good to go. And why is that good showing versus telling? Because they've already shown us in the past, so now they could tell us because they've shown it, and thus we're still envisioning it when we hear it, right? It's not just a simple telling. They've engaged with it, they being the writers of The Wire. Something similar occurs over here as well. Again, when you realize, it's nighttime and daytime in these scenes. Oh, okay. Oh, these stories are happening, although concurrently, it's not being told at the same time. Hopefully that makes sense. If it does not, please leave a comment. I'll do my best to explain it. But it clicks really well. It doesn't ruin the flow of the story at all, in my opinion. And by the time the story ends, although it doesn't have a happy ending per se, I think it does have a bittersweet ending. Sweet in that the nation of Britain still has that hope, that spirit of Dunkirk, right? Of although they lost, they're not going to be beat down and shaken. I really want to look into the history and see if when the soldiers did come back home, if the civilians were out there praising and not praising, but just grateful and happy to have their sons, essentially the sons and daughters who volunteered to be back from that war. It was really cool. What do you call it? A ghost pimple moment. The chills. I couldn't remember the proper term. But it really was a chilling, a moment that gave one the chill. Excuse me for stumbling with my words. Obviously, I got a bit distracted. But yeah. So if one hasn't seen Dunkirk, I highly recommend it. Even if you're concerned about the fact that you've heard there's no characters, go in knowing that there is a story. And what is the story that's being told? The story about the soldiers who needed to retreat from Dunkirk. More specifically, a story about how the British needed to retreat from Dunkirk. And although the French are present and they play a minor role, it's done in a really great way as well, where if you watch it, one is not going to be disappointed with everything. And Nolan's such a great writer too, because a lot of the elements that happens at the beginning of the movie, if one pays attention, those details end up making a lot of sense. Those details act as great foreshadowing agents within the story, where if you rewatch it, there's going to be a lot that one is going to pick up again. So essentially, what's my point? Dunkirk, despite supposedly not having characterization, is a movie that's worth rewatching, has a lot of rewatchability because again, in the way that the story is being told and the way that the narration is being parceled out to the audience. Yeah, so hopefully my joy and what do you call it? My joy and love for Dunkirk shines through. Not love. I couldn't think of a specific word. Enthusiasm. There you go. Hopefully, my enthusiasm for Dunkirk flows through because again, this is a movie that I heard about. I've heard great things, but also some negative things. And one of the reasons why I finally decided to check out this movie was because I'm not going to like Godzilla minus one. If one is any, I won't do any spoilers, but when I seen that movie, there's one specific scene with the boats, and a lot of people were pointing out, oh, this scene really reminded me of Dunkirk. Godzilla minus one had a Dunkirk moment. And so when I saw that the movie was available, I thought about Godzilla minus one. I thought about how I usually do enjoy Christopher Nolan's films. I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna seem very basic. The reason why I didn't watch this beforehand was because there was a lack of supernatural elements. Usually when I watch things, be it a show or a movie, I much prefer things with a sci-fi or supernatural element. But in this instance, as I said, I was thinking about Godzilla minus one, and I wanted to check out Dunkirk for myself. I'm really happy that I did, and I regret not watching it in theaters. It's definitely a movie I'm going to rewatch more than once. In fact, I already have. I really saw it 3 days ago. And then when I went out with my friends, we went back home to hang out. And we were all just talking about, hey, you know, what should we watch? Put something on in the background. And I was like, well, I just watched Dunkirk. Have you guys seen Dunkirk? And yeah, we put that on and we ended up watching it. There was only 3 of us, so not too big of a crowd. Not a party per se. But yeah. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you guys have seen Dunkirk, please let me know what's your opinion. Do you agree with the assessment that there's a lack of characters, thus it's a boring movie? A boring movie that's constructed really well. Or are you more aligned with my perspective that although it's a great movie that is lacking characterization, the story that it's telling more than makes up for the fact that there are no characters? Christopher Nolan was going for a specific idea and purpose with this movie, and in my opinion, he pulls it off really well, and it's a movie well worth engaging in. So again, would I recommend this film? Yes, I very much would, and I hope that you guys are able to check this out at least once. Have a great day, everyone, and take care.